It's great again to be together, and let's move now to our prelude, What Wondrous Love Is This? This is an instrumental version of it, and let's settle into a time of worship. We move into our opening words and chalice lighting, and here are some of our special guests today. I understand that a few stuffies, some stuffed animals, had a sleepover at First Unitarian Northfield this weekend, and there they are, gathered for the chalice lighting. So let's join them in lighting the chalice, sign of our free church tradition. We light this chalice as a beacon of the free church tradition, a tradition that lives on in us, a tradition that calls us together by covenant, by mutual promise to walk together in the ways of faith. May ours be a community of love that calls us ever to peace, hope, and justice. I'm going to light a chalice right here, and hopefully the stuffies are warming their paws around their chalice as well. Our opening hymn today is Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire, number 34 in Singing the Living Tradition. And here it is from Koine Music.
Though I may speak with bravest fire and have the gift to all inspire, but have not love, my words are vain as sounding brass and hopeless gain. I may give all I possess and striving soul my love profess, but not be given by love within. The prophet soon turns strangely thin.
I invite you to join me in the Declaration of Fellowship. Not only is this an important part of the service for First Parish of Northfield, it's also the centerpiece of today's service because we're going to be delving much more deeply into these words. So please join me in saying these words. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. And from that same sanctuary, we now have our Introit that is played by Anne and Lynn, and I'll post these lyrics in the chat.
dwell below the skies. Let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land, by every tongue.
As we move into a time of candles of joy and concern, I encourage you, if you can, to go into gallery view so that you can see all the different faces that are here gathered. We have a chance to look into each other's eyes and be in each other's presence.
There we are.
When we gather each week, we set aside some time in our service to speak of those things which are deep in our hearts and foremost in our minds. And we take this time in the service to offer them to one another so that we know that we are not alone in walking with challenges and celebrating joys. So if you would like to unmute and speak, I see that Chris has her hand up. Chris, would you like to speak first?
I would like to share the joy of that I am celebrating 1 year of cancer-free. This is my 1 year anniversary. It was last Sunday. So, and we're having a get together, a family Zoom celebration for Valentine's Day and remission and all the good things in life. I'm very happy about this.
Celebrations, Chris. How wonderful the news. Thank you. Do we have others who'd like to speak today? Yes, Roy.
I have been working on my room to make space for a sewing machine that I've had in storage for some time. It's now in place. I'm going to put oil in it and begin to make face masks. So I'm happy about my accomplishment.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Roy, and thank you for the work you're about to do.
I want to express joy for my dear wife, Stephanie. She's not on the service right now, but on Valentine's Day. We are headed for 22 years of marriage, and God bless her. Right, Betty?
Celebration of marriage. Thank you, Paul. Mary? No, okay. Just celebrating.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jenny.
Good morning, Jenny.
And I ask for everyone's thoughts for my healing in the next few months. I took a bad fall a few weeks ago and busted up my knee, and I'm going to head for surgery for an ACL repair in a few weeks, doing some great PT with some great caregivers. And I could use your thoughts as I proceed through recovery.
Thank you, Jenny. We will be thinking of you. Jennifer?
I just wanted to add sort of two candles of joy, but can put them together. The joy of the children of our community church, Rylan and Owen, delivering their stuffies, and the bravery of their stuffies having their sleepover, and the older youth helping to create some fun activities for them. So thank you to the youth of First Parish. We'll be sending out some videos to share the joy to the community in the beginning of the week so everyone can see. And also a joy of my mom and her bravery and courage. And I'm just filled with love for her and for my family.
here's to stuffies and here's to courage. And I love the stuffies that are making appearances on the Zoom this morning.
You're making me cry, Jennifer. Yes, you don't have to be a child to have stuffies. They sit on my computer and keep me company. This is Dandy. This is Ginger. And this is Terry, because he's a terrier.
Wonderful.
Oh,
I see Annette has her stuffy.
I think we should make it a policy that you bring your stuffies to service every Sunday. I see you, Jesse.
Yeah, I love it, Jesse. Oh, Paul, wait a minute. What was that? Excellent.
And I see that Rylan and Owen are lighting a candle of joy to celebrate the stuffy sleepover. Thank you.
are there animals in the our assembled congregation that are not stuffed, that are, you know, real live pets? I enjoy seeing other people's pets. We're catless at the moment. So.
I saw a
I
dog
see
over
Mary's got somebody.
Our
Yeah,
Mary's got somebody.
great.
This is Digi.
Well, it sounds like people are smiling a lot this morning, which is just wonderful. So for the smiles that we see in one another, for the tears that are held inside, for the companions, live and breathing and stuffed and childhood bare and worn, we light one more candle. May the love of this community surround you as you move through your days and weeks ahead. Now we have a story. Oh, first we have a pastoral prayer, then we'll have a story. Won't you join me in a time of prayer and meditation, whatever is the language that you choose to use. Spirit of love and spirit of life, on this winter morning, outside the snow gentles the dark shapes of hills, houses, fences, and the sides of the road. And may its softness also gentle our hearts, many of them heavy with the news this morning of the continued brokenness of our country, our disappointment at justice so elusive. And on this day, when love is celebrated with sweetness and lace-edged notes of care, may our warmth extend to those for whom this is a day of loneliness and sadness. May our love reach out to all who are alone. And as we continue to be in these oh so strange times, in this tender time, may we be strengthened by our coming together, even on screens, over telephones, by text and email, and even the post. Connected, we are strong like a web, knowing its gossamer threads attach us all to you, Spirit of love, and to one another. Each of us a jewel in the net, each of us a wondrous gift of the Spirit of life. Amen and blessed be. Now we have a story for all ages. And you can see that the stuffies are sitting in the front pew all ready for the story. Now, before I start the story, which is called The Agreement by Barry Lopez, I want to make sure that everybody knows who the major characters are. There are bears. I think everybody knows what bears are. There's a river. I think we all know about rivers. And there are salmon. Salmon are a kind of fish. So those are the major characters in the story. And once upon a time, before there were any people walking around this valley, there were bear people. Now, the bear people had an agreement with the salmon. The salmon would come upriver every fall, and the bears would acknowledge this, and they'd take what they needed. This is the way it was with everything. Everyone lived by certain agreements and courtesies. But the salmon people and the bear people had made no agreement with the river. The river had been overlooked. No one thought it was even necessary. Well, it was. And one fall, the river pulled itself back into the shore trees and wouldn't let the salmon enter from the ocean. Whenever they would try, the river would pull back and leave the salmon stranded on the beach. There was a long argument, a lot of talk. And finally, the river let the salmon enter. But when the salmon got up into this country where the bears lived, the river began to run in two directions at once, north on one side and south on the other, and roaring and heaving and white water rolling everywhere and big boulders coming out on the banks. Then the river was suddenly still. The salmon were afraid to move. The bears were hiding behind the trees looking out. And the river said in the middle of all this silence that there had to be an agreement. No one could just do something, whatever they wanted. You couldn't just take someone for granted. So for several days, they spoke about it. The salmon said who they were and where they came from. And the bears spoke about what they did and what powers they had been given. And the river spoke about its agreement with the rain and the wind and the crayfish and so on. And everyone said what they needed and what they would give away. But then a very odd thing happened. The river said it loved the salmon. No one had ever said anything like this before. No one had ever taken this chance. It was an honesty that pleased everyone. It made for a very deep agreement among them. Well, they were able to reach an understanding about their obligations to each other, their responsibilities, and everyone went their way. This remains unchanged. Time has nothing to do with this. This, Barry Lopez says, is not a story. When you feel the river shuddering against your legs, you are feeling the presence of all these agreements. As we move into a musical interlude, I know that Bruce is going to open up a breakout room, right, Bruce? And kids
Yep.
are welcome to join it.
So I do think I have a break room set up with an invitation out to people. It's called the Kids Break Room, so accept if you'd like, and we will run the breakout room until the end of the service. And at the end of the service, around announcement time, I'll close that room and then open up 2 more rooms for a coffee hour time. So join the room if you'd like. And now we'll get to our musical interlude.
I love that piece of music. Maybe we should just have a straight music service on Sunday morning. Our sermon this morning is called Love is the Spirit. That is the opening line of the Declaration of Fellowship we all read and or spoke just a few minutes ago. It's recited by the First Parish Unitarian in Northfield each Sunday morning. We're going to start with a little tiny bit of a history lesson. So this current Declaration of Fellowship is actually a bit of a mashup. And I have gratitude to Betty and her extraordinary memory that Betty shared with me that the current Declaration of Fellowship was adopted during the time that Reverend Cindy Fredo served as minister. That first line of the Declaration, love is the spirit of this church, is straight from a reading in our hymnal, number 473, written by Unitarian minister James Vila Blake in 1894 and adopted in that same year by his congregation, the Church of All Souls in Evanston, Illinois, and subsequently by scores of other congregations as well. Now, until a few years back, that first line here in Northfield, love is the spirit of this church, was followed by the rest of the piece as written by Blake, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth and love, and to help one another. Now, the current Northfield Declaration of Fellowship takes that first line, love is the spirit of this church, and then appends it to another piece by a Universalist minister, L. Griswold Williams, which was written in 1933. Those words are also in our hymnal. They're number 471, and they begin with a different line. Love is the doctrine of this church. And then it continues, the quest of truth is its sacrament and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with our God. And many, many Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world have also adopted Reverend Williams' words, including that first line, love is the doctrine of this church. I am so curious about how and why it was changed out here in Northfield, but answering that will have to wait for another day as we turn to the words themselves. Both of these agreements represent their authors' attempts to put into words values and aspirations. That is what was most commonly believed amongst most of us at the time that they were written. Now, this has never been an easy thing for Unitarians, Universalists, or Unitarian Universalists to do. There's always been a deep tension between wanting, on the one hand, to define who we are and what we share, and on the other hand, a deep aversion to any hint of creedalism. We'll explore that more fully in the next service in this series, The Quest for Truth. For now, it's worth noting that both of these begin with a line about love, a word noticeably absent from our current Unitarian Universalist principles and purposes. So today we delve into the value reflected in love is the spirit and its connected aspiration to dwell together in peace, recognizing that that phrase is not quite the same as love is the doctrine. Spirit comes from Latin, meaning to breathe or breathing. And doctrine comes from Latin too, and means teaching or instruction. What does it mean for a church to breathe love? That is, that the life force of a congregation is love. That is, as we live and breathe, we love. For me, my earliest clear memory of being in a Unitarian Universalist congregation was a moment of love as life force. It was the Sunday after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination in April 1968. I was 9 years old. All of us from the Sunday school, all ages, all sizes, were seated, smushed really, together on the hardwood pews of the children's chapel for service. The religious educator, Mrs. Becker, led the chapel service just for us. Our parents were in the main room with the minister. We were a congregation of children and youth. And Mrs. Becker dared to share her emotions to us. She cried as she spoke about the tragedy that had befallen our country. She spoke softly and passionately and honestly, as if we were real people deserving of the truth spoken in love. As hard as I try, I can't remember that monumental event even being mentioned at my elementary school, at least not when it happened. If it was, it certainly didn't stick with me like that morning in the chapel, gazing out the clear glass windows at the just starting spring and listening to the words of and about Dr. King, spoken with such love and grief. There was space for our roiling feelings and our questions. There was the spirit of love. Since that day, I have felt that spirit of love times too numerous to count. At times of joy, yes, but particularly at times of huge, yawning sadness. In a church basement, mourning with the single mom of a teenage son who had ended his own life. Sitting on the steps of a chancel on the morning and afternoon and night of September 11th. In an interfaith gathering following the South Asian tsunami. Each time holding space for care, for presence, for questions, and in our holding of one another, bound to each other, collectively becoming and being the spirit of love. Living in these places through these times, the spirit of love has become my own understanding of God at work. Spirit of love and spirit of life is how I address the divine when I pray. So I ask you, when have you experienced love as the spirit of this church? What did it feel like? Who have you become because of it? But we need too to name those times when love was not the spirit of this church, of other churches, when the spirit was missing and the church fell short. I have experienced those too, the aching absence of love, the hopes of dwelling together in peace dashed. Turning back for a moment to Reverend Williams, the author of most of the Declaration of Fellowship spoken each week at First Parish Unitarian. Williams was a Universalist minister at a time when Universalism was truly coming into its own as a counter to the hellfire and brimstone of Calvinist Protestantism. In the words of one writer, the Universalism of the late 19th and early 20th century was a conversion to love itself. Salvation depended not so much on believing or feeling something specific about God or Jesus, as much as it depended on being able to perceive and appreciate love. This was the universalism Reverend Williams brought as a circuit riding minister to small rural churches in Pennsylvania and Ohio before being settled at All Souls Church in Marion, Ohio. It was there in the earliest days of World War I that he fell under suspicion of the FBI and the local district attorney for speaking out about the mistreatment of those of German descent. In truth, it may be that the FBI had had their eye on Williams ever since he had been expelled from Meadville Seminary because of his support for striking Italian factory workers. In Ohio, not only did he voice his support for citizens of German ancestry, he spoke against the US entering the war, saying the capitalists of Germany were at war with the capitalists of France and Britain, and that the workers of the United States should not be sent into war by the capitalists of our country. For holding and speaking these views, his church fired him. When Williams registered with the Marion Draft Board, he cited his religious objection to war and asked to be classified as a conscientious objector. He was drafted for non-combat service and allowed to serve his time in France with the American Friends Reconstruction Unit, now known as the American Friends Service Committee, constructing prefabricated shelters for refugees of the war. Williams wrote a stirring poem about his work, constructing windows and doors for the little wooden demontables, which concludes with these lines: "O patient workman of the world, shaper of all this home of humankind, teach me the truer trade of making doors and windows for men's souls, windows for letting in love's widening dawn, doors swinging outward freely on truth's pleasant ways, windows for letting in love, doors for sending forth truth." Perhaps these were the beginning poetic stirrings of what would become the Williams Covenant. Here he was, a minister who had been dismissed from his congregation, and just a few years later, writing an ode to the church as love, which has subsequently stood the test of time. Nearly 90 years later, his words are still being used by dozens of congregations within our denomination. So let's honor his memory and work by asking, what would love as a doctrine mean for a church? How might love as a teaching, or perhaps the teaching of love, be different from love as the spirit of a church? I think we forget, at our own peril, I might add, that love can be and at times must be taught. We too easily forget how many people are raised in homes bereft of love, of parental love, familial love, a love that does not hurt. We forget the pressure from society on our youth that causes them to turn away from expressing their authentic selves, a culture that rejects their amazing, unique identity. We overlook estrangements and rifts that split apart families and neighbors and communities and our nation. We fail to see biases and prejudices, personal and systemic, which cut deep. What each and every one of these oh so human situations cries out for is the healing power of love. I firmly believe that love can be taught, and that Unitarian Universalist congregations can and should make the teaching of love central to our work. At times in our history, our loving teaching has actually been about making a way for love to thrive. I'm thinking of the ways Unitarian Universalists have led the way for the religious acceptance of LGBTQ folks in our pews and our pulpits. Oh, it's not been smooth or easy. We have had our share of what I will call Reverend Williams moments. But just yesterday, as I listened to an interview with an African-American Baptist pastor speaking of his congregation's struggle around these issues, I thought about not only how far Unitarian Universalists have come, but also what we have been able to teach about love, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. Our religiously held beliefs propelled us to embrace, not disdain, those who identify as LGBTQ. I thought about what has changed in the world because of our work, our love. When the Massachusetts Supreme Court issued their favorable decision about marriage equality, 7 of the 14 plaintiffs were Unitarian Universalists. And that case paved the way for the subsequent US Supreme Court case, affirming marriage equality for the nation. I thought about one of the most touching moments of my own ministry, officiating the legal wedding ceremony for 2 women, one of whom had grown up in a devout Roman Catholic family on the Lower East Side of New York City, the other a Jewish, German, Dutch woman who had survived the Holocaust as a hidden child. Oh, how our congregation celebrated not just Chris and Ruth, who were betrothed to one another that day, but for what we had learned and were teaching the world at large, that love simply cannot, must not be stopped. And its power to dream a future, to dwell together in peace, truly belongs to all of us. Our history with LGBTQ individuals is an example of the powerful, determined, clear-eyed love that is both the spirit of this church and its doctrine, its teaching. It is love made real. It is love strong. It is a love that sustains through the hardest of life's moments. It's a love that gets lost sometimes and yet has the power to be reborn in yet another form. This is the love that we must now bring to bear to heal what is broken and to imagine what to dwell together in peace could be. I need not detail for you how we are collectively perched on a precipice. The status quo, the business as usual, is not working. Not the extractive industries mining the oil and gas and minerals out of the ground, not the capricious spending of our carbon budget, nor the entrenched systems of racism, sexism, xenophobia, and misogyny. Not the soaring levels of social, economic, and class inequities, or the divisions of liberal, conservative, urban, rural, first world, and everyone else, the young and the older, the so-called developed, and the wilderness. We know the sad state of the world all too well. But here is the good news, friends. We do not face these challenges alone or unsupported. Remember the lines of that meditative hymn this morning? There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. That love is the church. It is one another, and it is the God at work with whom we covenant. We are a part of a long, long line of Unitarians, Universalists, and Unitarian Universalists who brought love to bear on the most pernicious and desperate issues of their times, slavery, mental health, incarceration, child labor, animal rights, women's rights, those living with disabilities, refugees, returning citizens. Love as spirit, as breath, love as doctrine, as teaching, served our ancestors well, binding them together, sustaining their determination. Why should it be any different for us? The words from Reverends Griswold Williams and James Vila Blake are identified as covenants in our hymnal. Covenants, what we agree to promise to one another in love. Our spiritual and actual ancestors have been making these promises for centuries, and we are their legacy, their promise for a future even better than the past. Remember those final words from our story from Barry Lopez. When you feel the river shuddering against your legs, you are feeling the presence of all these agreements. So let us inhale and exhale love. Breathe and be breathed by love. Teach love and learn from love. Remember love and loving. Dream love. Be love and be held by love. There is a love holding us all. Blessed be, and amen.
Thank you, Allison. Can everybody hear me? Now is the offering moment in our service for those who would like to contribute. Thanks to everybody who have been giving generously, who want to give today or can give in the future. The good works of our congregations are sustained by many things, including money. If you look in your chat, at the beginning of the chat, scroll up to the top, I have posted information about ways you can give to either or both congregations. So check on that if you'd like to. Otherwise, thank you.
We join with these words, or the congregational covenant from First Parish in Northfield. Freely we have received of gifts that minister to our needs of body and spirit. Gladly we bring our church and its wide concerns a portion of this bounty. And now our closing hymn, Break Not the Circle. And as we listen, I will post the lyrics in the chat.
Break not the circle of enabling love, where people grow forgiven and forgiving. Break not the circle, make it wider still, till it includes, embraces all the living. Come wonder at this love that comes to life, where words of freedom are with humor spoken. bonds remain unbroken. Join then the movement of the love that frees, till people of whatever race or nation will truly be themselves, stand on their feet, see eye to eye with laughter and elation.
Thank you, Anne and Lynn, for that beautiful music. Close our service this morning with extinguishing the chalice and benediction. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Blessed be, and amen. And please enjoy this postlude before we do a few announcements, and then we will move into breakout rooms. There's more love somewhere.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
Okay, everybody. At this time, we can open it up for announcements. Anybody have something to share?
Just want to announce that the Bernardston Church next week will be led by Barry Dietz. Barry, do you want to say anything about your service next week?
Sure. I was actually inspired by a wonderful essay by Michelle Alexander called "We Are Not the Resistance." And she talked about how the flow of our history, our nation's history, and in human history is toward a greater understanding, a striving for more freedom and more equality and more justice. And that's the direction that we are going. And so she spins it around that the idea of the resistance of the people who are trying to stop these kind of things. And so I'm calling my sermon, "We are not the resistance, we are the river." Looking at the rivers of movements and forwardness. And how many times in sermons and hymns, the idea of the flow of the river, moving things forward toward a greater coming together. And so we are not the resistance, we are the river. So that'll be next week.
Okay. Question. Annette?
Yes,
What time will the service be next week?
that's a good question. We originally had it scheduled for 10:30 because we thought it was a 3-church service. Barry, do you want to still do it at 10:30 or do you want to do it at 11:30?
I'm okay with what any time. 10:30 is fine by me. Sure.
Okay, 10:30.
10:30.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chantel.
I would announce that for First Parish of Northfield, Mary Meshark Stavely and I will lead a Chalice Circle service on the topic of gratitude. That's also 10:30 in the morning.
Very good. Any other announcements? Okay, I think I have set up some breakout rooms. Have you seen invitations? So there's one for Northfield, there's a kids room again, and one for Bernardston. So have at it. We'll keep going, and I'll stick around here in the main room for a few minutes just to make sure people get located. Thanks, everybody.